Chapter 9, Support the team during the first few months. Remember the satir change model? Planning and preparation won't help you sidestep the chaos stage, but they will mitigate its effects and duration. If you followed all my guidance in the previous chapter, then this is as much as you can reasonably prepare. You have given thought to all important elements. If you're not feeling confident about your initial way of working, or are concerned that it's not complete, rest assured, you've handled the most important success factor, which is to have a customized starting point. This chapter provides guidance for day one and all through the first few months, to help everyone get the hang of Agile with minimal thrashing and trouble. Start with a kick off. Even if you're trying Agile on only one type of work, chances are your new way of working will be quite different from the current one. Call attention to the significance and extent of the change by kicking off the experiment. A kick-off is a team meeting that marks a formal start. It's especially poignant for a team whose work, week to week and month to month, is somewhat routine. A kick-off might take anywhere from 30 minutes, if the team is already familiar with most of the content, to 2 hours, if they need to build shared understanding. More than a notional transfer of information, a successful kick-off touches people emotionally. Therefore, keys to success include compelling delivery, confidence, and engagement. You might want to use the following structure: provide context. Bring the charter you drafted in Chapter 4. Review it together, emphasizing what you're hoping the team will achieve for themselves, their customers, and the organization. Reiterate the motivation for a different way of working. Take care not to portray the existing way in a negative light, because it's been the best that people knew so far. Remind people of how the new way was designed. Describe the initial workflow and structure. Make sure everyone understands it the same way, and demonstrate how it manifests the chosen values and principles. Reiterate that it's an experiment. Explain what's changing, what's not, and the strategy regarding pre-existing obligations. Answer any open questions, especially those that indicate concern or anxiety. Answer what-if questions. What if this doesn't work? What if we hate it? What if senior management doesn't like it? Gain commitment. Let everyone involved in the experiment commit, publicly, to giving it an honest try. If the entire team has participated in the design process, they will already know all the above, and the kick-off will be little more than a brief official start. Otherwise, this is your opportunity to catch everyone up on decisions, answer questions, and secure their commitment. Key to that is to make the experiment safe, especially in steps 5 to 7. Nobody should be worrying about their job, title, compensation, performance review, or desk space. Choose your words and promises well to ensure safety. Finish small valuable work together as the team works. Expect to see these dynamics play out. Some members will strive to follow the process exactly as designed, while others will color outside the lines. When an issue arises that the workflow didn't account for, some people will address it based on the chosen design principles. Others will invoke principles that they are comfortable with. For example, you might hear in my previous company, they drilled into us, measure twice, cut once. Yet others will wait for a ruling from you. Some members will look online for additional advice or best practices and wonder, privately or publicly, why the team is not using them. These dynamics are inevitable because people want to be successful, and since they are not clones, they will have different approaches to the same situations. Some prefer proven procedures, while others prefer having options. Where some see problems, others see opportunities. Some want to learn from a given situation, while others want to just move on. While these dynamics can expand the options, more often they create noise that makes it hard for the team to succeed together. The solution is to be explicit and relentless about a shared mind, set, values, beliefs, and principles. You've articulated them during the design, people have committed to them. Now, make sure they act accordingly. Not with rewards and punishments, but with empathy, observations, listening, coaching, reminders, and reasoning. It won't be easy, because those are lists. People struggle to remember new values and principles when they adopt them, and struggle to articulate them once they become second nature. To make it easier, consider using hand-drawn posters and mantras. Posters, with pictures, icons, or words, will provide a visual reminder. Mantras are short phrases that you can use in conversations. A mantra I like using with teams is, finish small valuable work together, FSVWT. Even if they apply it only some of the time, it's still effective. Clearly, this mantra reinforces key Agile ideas, finishing, value, and collaboration. It suppresses behavioral patterns that hinder agility, such as siloing, individual specialization and task ownership, and overemphasizing the process. And the built-in wins are a powerful, simple catalyst to team growth. Finishing something valuable provides visible evidence of success, and when that something is small, success is quick to arrive. Supplementary resource: download collaboration etiquette posters from the book's companion website, agilefornonsoftwareteams.com. It's the small portion of FSVWT that will be tricky. As Chapter 7 explained, how you make the work small is important. Breaking work down to a sequence of hand-offs between specialists might be familiar and easy, but for agility, choose tasks that provide value, increase learning, allow feedback, mitigate risk, seize an opportunity, or control the cost of change. For most team members, doing so will be unfamiliar, it might seem like pointless administrative overhead, and they might be worried that showing partial, emerging deliverables would reflect badly on them. Be patient, work collaboratively, and make it safe to try. It takes most people weeks to build this skill. Teams new to Agile or to teamwork seem to have a grace period of 2 to 3 months during which people will give each other and their new methods a chance. Past that period, they are more likely to devolve into groups of individuals doing their parts. During the grace period, frequently remind the team to FSVWT, and they'll have a much higher likelihood of success as a team. Make working agreements. No amount of upfront workflow design and planning can cover every situation that your team will encounter. Note 1, even the project management body of knowledge, which has been captured in several thick tomes, Note 2, cannot address every situation encountered by real-life practitioners. As mentioned before, intentionality and explicitness of mindset will help everyone respond consistently to situations that arise. The team should add a few high-impact working agreements, which codify important matters they never considered or express desired behaviors that don't occur regularly enough. In most teams, agreements relate to interpersonal matters such as collaboration, transparency, decision-making, feedback, and keeping each other informed. Examples from teams I've worked with include collaboration and interactions. Give help when asked. If you're not learning or contributing in a meeting, feel free to go do something else that's useful. If your task has a high potential for errors, whoever you ask to collaborate with, you must say yes. One language in the office. No headphones. Behavioral expectations. If a work item is not on the team board, we don't do it. Work on team stuff only in the team space. Decision making. At least 3 people must participate in making high-level design decisions. If you're not in the room, you accept the group's decision. If you can't attend, someone may speak for you. Agreements should be written down, since human memory can be rather plastic and misleading. The act of writing an agreement down is a chance for clarification and refinement. Post written agreements visibly to make them a nagging, free, accessible reminder, something they can never be if buried in some electronic tool. The word agreement is well chosen, connoting a more informal convention than bylaw or rule, and more humility and context awareness than best practice. Agreements remain in effect until the team wants to change them. Simple, reasonable, workable agreements are easier to put in place than perfect ones. Anyone can suggest them, and they require everyone's commitment to become binding. Managers should not force agreements on a team, but may point out the need for them. Pat Reed, Senior Director, Gap, Inc. One of our teams came up with a will of shame to deal with the inevitable violation of working agreements. The transgressor would have to spin the wheel of shame and carry out whichever punishment the dial landed on, which usually involved having to do something silly like wear a silly hat or treat the rest of the team to ice cream. It was a surprisingly effective and fun way to defuse problem behavior and enhance the team's sense of cohesion. Stabilize the system. If you think of your team's work management system as having demand on one side and supply on the other, you'll want to create balance, good flow, between those two end points. That will increase its reliability, which will support overall business performance and agility. Visualizing the work is critical for understanding, and thereby managing, its flow. When you consistently capture all the work in a visual manner, it becomes easy to detect forms of imbalance, more items getting started than finished, items piling up someplace along the workflow, or items getting blocked. And, when you calculate and graph how long the team has been taking to process work items, note 3, it becomes easy to see trends and variance. Imbalance and high variance generally indicate that the system, through which the work flows, is unstable. In Chapter 7 you read about, and in Chapter 8 you used, two basic principles that improve flow, constraining work intake and getting to done, focusing on finishing what started. Below are 4 additional ideas to stabilize your system. Note 4, pull work into WIP, limited workflow stages. Set a work, in, progress limit on every intermediate stage, and take work, pull, into each stage only if its limit allows. For example, imagine your workflow is a simple ready, doing, checking, done, and that all 5 team members can process work in doing but only 2 of them may do checking. You might experiment with a limit of 4 items on the doing column and a limit of 2 items on the checking column. If the doing column is full, that is, the team is currently doing 4 items, they won't take on another one. Instead, once the checking column drops to 1 item or to none and an item in doing is finished, the team may move, pull, it to the checking column. Try this for a short while and, based on the results, consider tweaking the limits. Manage chronic waits and blockers. Often, the tasks that throw systems off balance are not the labor-intensive ones, but the ones that incur delays and blockages. Nothing useful happens while they wait in some queue, and since people don't want to be idle, they start working on other items and subsequently get themselves into the trouble described earlier. So, look for repeated delays and blockages that are due to your workflow design or to organizational policies, and see how you can mitigate them. For example, see Chapter 8 for alternatives to approvals. Clear temporary congestion. Visualization will help you trace erratic flow to a specific root cause. Too much demand is hitting a part of the workflow. For example, think of live concerts. The food stands are not usually busy, but have long lines during intermissions. If you see work pile up in one column, avoid pushing more work into that column or starting other work. Remember, optimizing for keeping everyone fully loaded will create bottlenecks, especially at the specialists, and the team won't be able to deliver finished results fast enough or reliably enough. Instead, shift efforts toward clearing the congestion. One form of increasing capacity this way is the all-hands-on-deck strategy. Before and after pictures of a 7-person team's board. In this picture, the team had just set up their board, and they're putting on it every item they were working on or planning to. Notice their high WIP, both overall and in 3 mid-workflow columns. 2 weeks later, the team had cleared the congestion in 2 of the 3 columns. Essentially, they got to done on every item whose state was already advanced, and had reduced the number of items in the third column to its WIP limit. Determine how to handle rush jobs and emergencies. These kinds of work delay other important work, for several reasons. The obvious reason is that they take time away from the team, less obviously, by disrupting flow and causing expensive task switching, they sap even more time and attention. Some rushes and emergencies are real and justify a response. One popular mechanism is to set aside a little team capacity that may be immediately used for expediting work. That capacity might be shared by the team or provided by a specific person on rotation. This solution is analogous to the shoulder on a highway, a usable lane that is kept empty except for emergencies. Some emergencies, though, are false and ought to be funneled through the regular workflow. If you set clear and meaningful service level expectations for normal work and achieve them, your customers and stakeholders will likely treat fewer items as emergencies. Note 5, one important manifestation of the people-first value is sustainable pace. The team should be able to maintain its pace indefinitely. This is a necessary condition for having a stable system that has a predictable, reliable rate of value delivery as well as the capability for long-term performance. Perhaps more important, stable systems also prevent the drawbacks of unsustainable pace, lower quality work, burnout, sickness, and turnover. Make sure the team understands their capacity, note 6, and doesn't accidentally, or intentionally, overcommit themselves on a regular basis. Watch for attitudes and behaviors that hamper agility. When human beings try to operate with a different mind set, they're prone to exhibiting attitudes and behaviors that have served them so far, but don't align to the new mind set. That's natural. Your team will have to notice and manage their bounce backs for several months. Being part of an organization will present an extra challenge for them during this time. They will continue interacting with others, especially managers and stakeholders, who are not part of the change and thus will continue to behave as they have done so far. Be on the lookout for attitudes and behaviors, anyone's, including your own, that undermine the efforts to change the team's way of working. Here are several examples, which I've seen again and again in Agile transformations, and suggestions for how you might respond to them. In planning, the team is looking at decomposing a large work item, and the product owner/stakeholder/manager says, "We need the whole thing anyway, so don't bother splitting it, there's no value in that." The consequence of doing so? Delaying value, slowing feedback, and making it harder to change course. Even if the customer wouldn't take delivery of a part of the deliverable, splitting it into a sequence of a few meaningful pieces will allow earlier feedback and course correction. In planning, task X is in such and such area, which is Haley's speciality. Haley, you'll do that one. While it's reasonable to expect a specialist to perform their tasks better and faster, that won't be the result if the specialist is overloaded and can't get to them soon enough. Consistently assigning tasks to overloaded specialists is the best way to create delays and hurt teamwork, and it's a vicious cycle. Instead, invest in spreading knowledge and skills around in order to limit dependency on specialists to the really hard cases. The team is working on task Y, and manager/stakeholder asks them, "When will you be done?" This question makes sense only when the workers have only that task to work on and its level of complexity makes estimation viable. A safer, more empowering alternative is, "Can you give me a range for how long you might need to complete Y, and tell me what else you have going on that can delay Y?" If the answers indicate a schedule risk, ask, "How may I support you?" or "What can we defer or simplify?" More work remains than can fit in remaining time, and the manager/product owner tells the team, "Do as much as you can or try your best." These directives disempower the team. Would they not try their best without exhortation? Worse, they imply that being busy, and specifically, working individually and heads down, is the road to success. An empowering, strategic alternative is to ask the team this: "Given our constraints and intended outcomes, What's the best way to move forward? More specific follow-up questions are, which portions can we address later? What can we simplify? What can we renegotiate? Team member at a daily touchpoint, I've worked on deliverable Z, my part is done. When you hear that, you know there are hand-offs and little teamwork. Instead, ask the team what they need to finish the entire deliverable. Manager says to team member, I need you to do task T. I know the team has already planned the next few days, but it shouldn't take more than a few hours. Beyond increasing workload, this interference, known as the shoulder tap, invalidates both the team's planning mechanisms and their ability to commit to each other. Better to put task T in the queue of upcoming work, E.G. a backlog, and indicate its importance and urgency. If they are really higher than the team's other work, it will get done. The organization is considering having the team work on a project, and the team's manager is asked, what's your estimate for it, or when can you get started? Since the manager isn't one of the workers, she shouldn't give a number and instead should ask the team for a range. Better yet, he or she should first help the stakeholders get clear on the intended outcomes, on how much achieving those outcomes is worth to them, and on the costs and consequences if they're delayed. Director tells manager, I need to take one of your people for a few weeks to help with project P. Instead of automatically saying, yes, the manager ought to discuss the consequences of this action to the team's productivity and well-being. In a world of resources who work on narrowly defined pieces, the consequence would be a simple reduction in output. In a world of human beings who build collaborative relationships and work toward shared outcomes, the consequence can be much worse. If the temporary reassignment is justified, the manager may still be transparent and empowering with the team by convening them, explaining the context and reasons, and then asking the team to choose who would go to that project. The alternative, deciding unilaterally, then being seen as yanking someone off the team, violates trust and safety, and conveys that empowering has been just talk. Reflect and improve frequently. One choice you made when designing your workflow was the frequency of holding retrospectives, reflective team meetings designed for improvement of process and teamwork. Make sure each meeting has a facilitator, someone who will look after the process of the meeting but doesn't own it or preside over it. That person may be the team leader or even a team member, and may vary from one meeting to the next. When the team is still getting used to Agile, set aside 60 to 90 minutes for each retrospective. They'll need the time. Expect most retrospectives to not have a set topic. Instead, the participants will decide what to talk about. There are many good processes you can adopt and adapt. Note 7, here is the one I often use in the first few retrospectives with new Agile teams. In the first 5 minutes, everyone writes down on sticky notes, one item per note, things of any significance that happened, or didn't but should have happened, since the last retrospective. This is factual recall, with neither interpretation nor judgment. When they are done, they post their stickies in no particular order on a wall, window, or whiteboard. Everybody reads everything, or the meeting leader reads them out loud, verbatim. They remove any duplicates and bring almost duplicates or closely related notes together so as to make them look like a single big note. The point is to create a shared recollection of events without calling any of them out. Every person, in silence, looks at each note and notices their personal reaction to it, very positive, neutral, negative, very negative. They indicate any non-neutral reaction on the note or immediately beside it. The team should agree on the legend for these indicators ahead of time. I usually provide green and red markers, and suggest using dots for low reactions and stars for heightened ones. The team now discusses the items that got the most pronounced reactions, whether positive or negative. Based on the texts, reactions, and any new thoughts, they draw insights and articulate learnings about successes, challenges, risks, gaps, and opportunities, anything that relates to their process and teamwork. The meeting facilitator captures their key points on a flip chart, whiteboard, or document. After 15 to 30 minutes, or when the list starts getting long, team members highlight the points they believe to have particular significance for them. In the now what stage, the team members look at the highlighted points and discuss what they'll do about them, or at least about the top few. The results of this conversation might be affirmation of what works, process changes, new or different working agreements, and experiments to try. Aim to have between 1 and 3 concrete, important changes or experiments, and ideally each should have a team member lead the charge on it. In this process, it's the team's shared wisdom and interest that raise the topics most worthy of discussion, and it's the team that narrows down the topics and their responses to a manageable, focused set. Most of your retrospectives will be participant-driven like that. In addition, in the course of doing work, people might notice a topic that merits its own conversation. 3 common early day examples are: customers aren't providing meaningful early feedback, many work items languish in a block state, we're not collaborating enough. For a topical retrospective, replace the first 2 steps in the process with the following. On sticky notes, team members write their answers to predetermined, factual questions about the topic. For instance, in the last few weeks, which kinds of items were blocked? What blocked each one? What did it take to release them? For this particular topic, someone might collect relevant data ahead of the retrospective. Same duplication as above. Every person, in silence, indicates on each note what kind of effect it had, positive, negative, neutral, on them or on the team. As above, agree on the legend or scale beforehand. Brianna Ramos, HR associate, TechSmith, we were used to frequent drive-by interruptions, and assumed they were a noise we had no control over. After discussing this as a team, we're now tracking how disruptive they are and experimenting with solutions for gaining control. The structural similarity between the attendee generated and the topical retrospective agenda is not accidental. Both are based on the focused conversation method, also known as ORID. Note 8, this 4-part sequence starts with objective data, continues with reflections on and reactions to the data, proceeds to generate insights and interpretations of the data and the reflections, and closes with decisions for moving forward, recommendations, experiments, and action items. This powerful structure gives people room to think and collaborate, and prevents them from jumping to conclusions with partial information. For an example of using ORID to solicit feedback on emerging deliverables, read this endnote. If you ever notice yourself approaching a retrospective as a free-form discussion, stop and consider following the ORID sequence instead. 1. As the team discusses improvements to the process, help them be explicit about how those improvements implement the chosen values and principles, or not. Be careful with suggested changes that worked for us in the past, they might have been appropriate for pre-Agile ways of working and, as such, may be in conflict with what you're trying to achieve. Similarly to treating the team's first Agile way of working as experimental, it helps to treat their process improvements as experimental. After all, even if the work is not complex, the team as a human system is. It's usually hard, or even impossible, to know how well some changes would work out. Moreover, since every change experience involves a chaos period, treating each one as experimental makes them more palatable. Retrospectives are terrific learning opportunities, both due to their structure and due to the mental pause from work. Make sure the team doesn't skip them. If you hear one of the following common reasons for skipping them, here is what you should do: we're too busy. Allow them the time by factoring it into work plans. Nothing ever changes as a result, help them act on their resolutions, the magic is in follow-up. We've made enough changes, and we're good now, help them see gaps between what they have and what they could have. Ideally, reflection and improvement may happen after any activity and shouldn't have to wait for a recurring meeting. Realistically though, human beings seem to struggle with shifting quickly between doing and reflecting. Having scheduled opportunities helps make these mental shifts, but they can't be too far apart or people forget what their issues were or how they felt about them. Lead intentionally. Even before Agile came along, the word leadership had different semantics than management, although to this day many organizations continue to use the two interchangeably. The fundamental distinction is that you manage things but you lead people. The same person might do both. Agile favors servant leadership, the kind of leadership that creates conditions in which teams thrive and have the best chance of accomplishing their objectives. We touched on team-level leadership in Chapter 8, and the expectation is for higher-level formal leaders to act that way as well. Leadership is needed both for regular work and during times of change. Leadership creates culture, primarily through rewarding desirable behaviors and discouraging undesirable ones. Leadership is what separates engaged, responsible workforces from ones where people only check boxes on their job descriptions. As a leader, all your words and actions will affect the culture, whether you want them to or not. To affect it in a direction that will beget success, you must be intentional. Draw the mental picture, feel it in your bones, tell yourself the story of how you want your team and organization to be, and always lead toward that North Star. Culture change is usually slow and requires a lot of patience. Note 10, Andy Plattner, Agile coach, Daimler, our marketing team asked me, as the internal coach, for Agile training. In the next few weeks, they struggled with the process and the structure, but I wasn't available to help them beyond giving occasional feedback and recommendations. They tried following Scrum, but didn't appoint a Scrum Master of their own, nor did the team leader or manager step up to keep the change alive. The process slowly broke down and reverted to individual, specialized planning. When it comes to creating an Agile culture, pay extra attention to the following matters: support people through the change. People are neither emotionless resources nor programmable units. Change is personal and can be hard. A solid way to support them is to have frequent, regular one-on-ones with your team members. Every week or two, always at the same time, meet privately with a team member to talk about them. Focus on their growth, experiences, concerns, challenges, and suggestions. Use this time to mentor, coach, and listen. Don't talk about work items or status, leave those matters to team settings. It's okay to point out problems and discuss solutions, but be sure to also acknowledge positives and appreciate efforts. As well, rely on the team's frequent touchpoints to serve as reminders that they are all in it together. Nick Helling, Content Marketing Agile Coach, Red Hat. We are continuously reinventing our team structures to pragmatically meet our needs as we understand them in the moment. Our Scrum Masters help manage change fatigue and maintain continuity. Supplementary resource: download How to Have One-on-One Meetings That Matter from the book's companion website, agilefornonsoftwareteams.com. Start and end with outcomes. Whatever you discuss with the team, keep going back to its outcome/vision/objectives, why it matters, and help people see the meaning of their contribution. Draw and defend clear boundaries. In an organization, nobody has 100% autonomy, which means there are always boundaries. Make sure your team is clear on their boundaries. What can they do and not do? What kinds of decisions are theirs to make? When should they work across boundaries? Boundaries of Agile teams tend to be wider than in controlled environments, but that width matters only if team members are aware of it. Watch the work, not the workers. Your team deserves a work system that enables them to succeed. Continuously improve the system and develop the team, so that they can leverage their autonomy to consistently take responsible action. Reduce the load of approvals and reviews. Their inherent delays are one problem. When they signal mistrust of the workers, that can be a bigger problem. Get additional pairs of eyes on a deliverable when mistakes are likely or costly, or in regulatory compliance situations. Otherwise, consider different feedback loops that don't disempower people. Set behavioral expectations for people. Specifically, expect them to demonstrate behaviors congruent with the chosen values and principles. Examples of such behaviors include explaining decisions, transparency, assuming positive intent on the part of others, respect, and seizing opportunities to work together rather than pass work to others, collaboration. Model these behaviors yourself, consistently and authentically. Look to the system, not the people, for explanations of problem behaviors. When a team member exhibits a troubling or difficult behavior, your instinct might be to question their personality or motives. In many cases, their behavior is better explained by the system they're in. If you change the system, you'll get different behaviors. A highly competent and articulate team lead noticed that his director, who acted as the product owner, didn't appreciate his suggestions. To keep receiving his annual bonus, the team lead needed the director to give him a good annual review, so he learned to keep his mouth shut during retrospectives. At another company, a senior product owner was in charge of the project portfolio. I noticed that he wasn't spending any time prioritizing it, despite repeatedly agreeing with me about the importance of doing that. Later I learned that he simply didn't see the point, because almost every week the CEO would come in with ideas for new projects, and he had to stop the team's current work and switch over to the new ones. In that management system, the portfolio didn't matter until the CEO changed his ways. Notice how you communicate and act. Your pre-existing habits will reflect themselves in your behaviors and words, and some might negate your genuine attempts to lead people as suggested above. Self-awareness is the key for growth as an effective leader. Seek allies and support. While one person can't change a work culture single-handedly, he or she can collaborate with enough other people to effect change. Rely on influential team members, peers, and executives throughout the journey. Reduce the magnitude and duration of the chaos stage by seeking customized assistance from Agile experts, whether internal or external. Kirsten Bressler, Agile coach. As a permanently employed coach and Scrum Master, I accompanied the financial control team for roughly half a year. I educated them on the Agile values and the Scrum framework, and helped them decide how to adjust the framework to their context. Later the team and the manager told me that they wouldn't have done it as intensively as they did if I hadn't been available to them. I can't do proper justice to the matter of Agile leadership in this brief space. For a much deeper dive into it, read my book The Human Side of Agile. It's organized as answers to the most pressing questions Agile leaders have. Assess how it's going. Whether you treat your new way of working as an experiment or as a certainty, you'd do well to frequently assess how it's going. Doing that will allow you to identify the areas most deserving of recognition or in most need of help. There are two parts to this assessment. 1. How well are you following the principles you've chosen? You started designing your new way of working by choosing operating principles. Then you design tactics, such as roles, practices, and touchpoints based on those principles. Now, evaluate what's actually happening. For each principle on your list, score how well your current tactics implement it. You might do this yourself, or ask each team member to do this scoring from their own perspective, then tabulate the results and examine them. I like to use a 1 to 5 scale, where 1, 3, and 5 are defined as follows, and 2 and 4 are intermediary points. 1, low, we apply this principle partially and inconsistently. 3, medium, we're mostly doing it, but it requires constant intention and attention. 5, high, this principle is now ingrained in everything we do, it feels like second nature. If you have more than one team, assess each one separately, based on their own principles. If the teams are closely related and are trying to exhibit a similar mindset, also note the consistency of each principle's application, the spread of its distribution, across the teams. Keeping with my general theme of do what you think is right for you, notice how this assessment works. You're not checking compliance with the frameworks or someone's checklist of roles, practices, artifacts, and meetings. Nor are you looking for evidence of agile behaviors if your chosen way of working isn't fully agile in the first place. Instead, you're assessing congruence between what you intended to do, based on values and beliefs, and the behaviors you actually see. You're examining how systematically you're applying your principles in the experiment. I'll say it again, your way of working doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Conducting this informal, imprecise assessment should take you or the team no more than 30 minutes. Do it every few weeks and discuss the results with them in a safe space. You should see improvement over time, but don't expect it to be smooth. When the numbers are generally 1 or 2, it's an indication that you're actively trying to create a new way of working, but it's not distinct enough, or hasn't taken hold, yet. Together with the team, try to understand whether that's simply the Satir model's chaos stage, or whether they're not going further because their attempts so far have actually produced adverse results. The numbers must stabilize at 3 or higher for you to say that the team truly has a new way of working. It will probably be months before this happens. When it does, you can move to the more important questions, too. How, and how much, is your team more successful now? What sort of downsides accompany that success? Answering these questions will tell you whether the mindset you've espoused, and are manifesting in your tactics, does in fact get the results you hoped for when you began this journey. Be aware, though, that some business outcomes are extremely hard to measure, and some changes in them will be unrelated to your new way of working. Therefore, at this point, a qualitative or subjective assessment will serve you better than hard and fast metrics. Chapter 10 dives deeper into many reasons for this statement. However you approach it, you must be able to gather some convincing evidence to justify continuing the experiment. Trying a new way of working is hard. Trying an agile one, with its complexity and discipline, takes extra patience and resilience. So celebrate progress frequently, and use setbacks as learning opportunities. It will be several months before you can say, "We've got the hang of Agile." This will be your evidence, you're now completing meaningful deliverables at a more even rate and with less stress than before. Your customers and stakeholders like what they're getting, and it's helping them accomplish their outcomes better. The team is really working as a team. The process has become easy for the team, and they can explain how every part of it manifests their desired values. Once you're there, turn to Chapter 10 for guidance on expanding and increasing agility. Supplementary resources: go to agilefornonsoftwareteams.com and download collaboration etiquette posters and how to have one-on-one meetings that matter. Chapter 10, Increase and expand agility. Even if your experiment has covered only one kind of work, that's an achievement. If you and the team haven't celebrated progress so far, now is the time to do so. As well, consider running a 2 to 3 hour retrospective to generate high-level insights and learnings about the journey so far. This is the earliest point to consider making permanent some of the experiment's aspects, such as the roles or seating arrangement. And when you're ready to expand and increase agility, this chapter will give you ideas. We start with increasing the agility of your current Agile implementation, continue with expanding its scope, and close with pitfalls to watch out for. Continuous improvement. The Agile mindset is emphatic about continuous improvement. Teams should regularly and collaboratively improve their product and way of working within the context of their values and beliefs. The assumption is that, being closest to their work, teams should know what to improve, figure out how to do that, and own the actions. While this is an empowering perspective, teams sometimes feel stuck or unsure how to proceed. Here are a number of ideas that many people have found useful. Simplify. While some of your work is likely complex, not all complexity is born equal. Some is essential, it is due to the nature of the work. The rest of it is accidental, the team causes it by the way they work. Note 1, for example, The task of assembling a 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle has a high level of essential complexity, determined by the puzzle's picture and the shapes of the pieces. If I try to assemble the puzzle on a small table that already has other things on it, coffee mugs, headphones, books, I'm causing accidental complexity that will make my work harder. There's usually little you can do about essential complexity, other than, most likely, letting technology handle it. Instead, look for accidental complexity, understand its causes, and strive to reduce it. Eliminate waste. Waste, a term from lean thinking, No. 2, refers to anything in the workflow that doesn't add value to the deliverable. Non-agile, non-lean processes are often riddled with waste, which gives rise to a powerful insight: you might increase productivity and throughput more by eliminating some of the wasteful parts of the workflow, which is relatively easy to do, than by improving the productive parts, which can be quite hard to do, and they may already be quite efficient. Here are the 7 categories of waste, along with some common examples: overproduction, rarely used or just, in case deliverables, bells and whistles, solutions to more or bigger problems than necessary partially done work, collecting requirements, creating designs or writing drafts that never make it to a deliverable, producing deliverables that don't get approved, relearning, going back to forgotten subject matter or procedures, reacquiring knowledge, revisiting/updating. Requirements and plans, checking something more than once, hand-offs, moving work between team members, incurring delays and losing information along the way, task switching, working on 2 or more deliverables in parallel, interrupting focused work for meetings, questions, or incidents, delays, waiting for someone who has necessary information or other inputs, waiting for approval, defects, problems found in work that was done earlier, problems that recur because the first fix wasn't good, collecting, managing, and prioritizing defects to fix. As you were reading each waste category, did you think, yep, we've got that one? Then you're in good company. Nobody ever gets to 0% waste, but considering the typical starting point, any reduction is welcome. The Agile principles explained in this book go a long way toward reducing waste. For instance, collaborating with the customer on what's really needed reduces overproduction, and finishing started items, instead of starting many ones, reduces partially done work. Look at your workflow, identify the waste you have at each point, and focus on the worst offenders. You might decide not to invest in reducing some of them. For the others, consider changes to the workflow, policies, or team structure that may reduce the waste, hopefully with minimal side effects. Tighten the workflow. When you design the workflow in Chapter 8, my advice was to keep it simple. The goal was to get started easily with something workable. In Chapter 9, the advice was to limit WIP on intermediate workflow stages, clear congestion, manage blockers, and codify your response to emergencies. The goal was to stabilize the system and settle on a sustainable pace. 2 additional actions you can take now for better flow are: assess the board's fit for purpose. As a visual representation of the work state and flow, how well does it help everyone see and manage the flow? Get with the team and ask yourselves, how does the board help us implement our work principles? For example, does it help us pick the most important work to do? Does its physical layout help us constrain our workload? How does the board make it hard for us to follow our principles? For instance, do its columns imply that people should focus on their individual parts instead of on the whole? Does the board encourage people to just move work along instead of bringing it to the high standard we defined for done? Does anyone do work that's never reflected on the board? For example, are people finding it necessary to make their own personal work lists? Do they get assigned additional tasks, which compromise their availability to this team? Are the columns, work states, useful? If they are too general or high level, it's hard to know what goes on with a task. If they are too specific, managing the board can become a headache. Chris Taylor, CEO, Fisher's Tech, our main board represented new work, but we didn't have a good handle on the flow of problem solving. So we added a board near the main one. Employees are surfacing problems all the time and posting them in the leftmost column. Management meets every week to prioritize them and choose problems for the week, and each item receives someone's commitment to getting it solved. A problem moves to done, the rightmost column, if the right people got together, understood the root cause, and produced an action plan. In addition to actually solving our problems, this board communicates to everyone that problems get taken care of. Set explicit policies around items entering the workflow, moving through its stages, and coming out of it. Say, for example, that a single person manages and sequences most work items, but other people sometimes add their own items to the front of the queue. This is a very common situation for early stage teams. In this case, you'd get the team together and determine or improve the policy for putting any item in the queue, that will increase consistency and transparency, and allow everyone to act more strategically. In other examples, you might define a policy for dealing with items that sit too long in some mid-workflow state, or policies for handling routine and minor ad hoc tasks. Kirsten Bressler, Agile coach, the financial control team and their manager were frustrated about not being able to get their planned work done. After collecting stats over a couple of iterations, they were shocked to realize that 40% of their work was unplanned. They found that all unplanned and short notice requests came from upper management, including their second-level manager, the same people who were also expecting planned work to get done within original time frames. After a simple conversation with management, they upgraded their process, and were able to reduce unplanned work to 15% on average. Moving forward, they left a 15% buffer in each iteration for unplanned work. Anytime the need was less, they pulled in other tasks from the prioritized backlog. Make opportunities for learning. The more people learn about the work, each other, their technology, their customers, the better their results. The good teamwork and feedback loops you've established will be a great start toward amplifying the team's learning, and there's room for a lot more. Spend time observing your customers at work, experiment, reflect after activities, teach each other skills, hold study groups and book clubs, get ideas from other people in the organization who are also trying on new ways of working. Be aware, though, all these ideas require some slack, a bit of time, intentionally allocated to rest, learning, or defocusing and not to mission, critical work or other busyness. Note 3, upgrade the team space. If your team has got this far without co-locating, and co-location is a viable option, now might be a good time to float the idea without encountering too much resistance. And if they are already co-located, consider experimenting with the design of their space because every detail matters. Distances between team members, who sits next to whom, visual and auditory distractions, foot traffic, what's on the walls, these aspects often have outsized effects on communication, collaboration, and focus, and therefore on results. Make sure the team is consistently involved in the design of their space. Keep asking, how do we know? People like to think they're right, and in your interactions with team members, managers, and stakeholders, they will probably sound rather confident. Confidence blinds people to their risk of being wrong. An agile mind, set, intent on doing more of the right and less of the wrong, requires a certain level of humility. Note 4, develop the habit, in yourself and in your team, of checking your assumptions and validating your choices, by asking questions like these: how we do know that we're prioritizing work effectively? That we understand a business problem correctly? That our intended solution is viable? That the solution we've developed is correct? That the feedback we've solicited is honest? The more you leave to confidence and assumptions, the more luck you'll need to succeed. Expanding the scope of agility with the experiment a success, you might wish to apply Agile to more or bigger undertakings. Each kind of expansion has its own challenges and options. Same team, more kinds of work in Chapter 4, you made an inventory of your work, and chose a subset of that work for the Agile experiment. The team may now be ready to expand their new approach to address another item from that list. Perhaps that's a different product, service, or solution, perhaps it's some other major responsibility or activity. Repeat the rest of the guidance in Chapter 4, and if Agile is suitable for the new choice, repeat Chapter 8. It will be much easier and quicker this time. With the team tackling 2 or more different kinds of work using Agile concepts, you will now need to make an additional decision: how to keep work management easy. You might want to have separate workflows and separate boards. If you do, try to locate them side by side. Another common solution is to capture everything on a single board. You might dedicate a swim lane, horizontal portion of the board, to each kind of work, or code items based on their area. The principle behind these solutions is to see and manage everything in one place, so the team can apportion their efforts effectively. More of the value stream. Another way to increase agility is by extending the scope of the team's responsibility, and likely also their membership, to include more of the value stream. This concept refers to the entire flow of work, starting from a customer order or an approved initiative and ending in the customers and businesses realizing some benefit. For example, say you manage a large bookstore, and you've implemented Agile principles at the checkout. The staff there work as a team now, focus on the outcome of patron satisfaction with the checkout experience, and arrange their shifts themselves. The checkout is part of a larger value stream, which starts with a person walking in looking for interesting books, and ends when the person has found some and paid for them. Implementing agility to the buyer's journey might improve customer outcomes, such as satisfaction, and business outcomes, such as revenue per visit. In general, allowing teams responsibility over entire value streams tends to be a great way to build a one-team culture of engagement and contribution while reducing the perceived need to ensure accountability. Carry out this type of extension by repeating the guidance of chapters 4 and 8. While workflow design will be familiar, you may well have to increase the size of the team and involve people from diverse functions and specialties. Usually, this requires people to pitch in more areas. Some will appreciate the opportunity to contribute and to grow, and some won't, especially if they self-identify with their role or think they're above the pay grade of a specific responsibility. As before, imposing Agile on them is a non-starter. Opt for invitation, and remind them this is still an experiment. Whether it succeeds or fails, all of you will emerge from it knowing more about your choices and preferences. More teams, doing different work. You've experimented with Agile for one team, and now another team is interested. If the two teams rarely depend on each other for completing work, that's easy. Follow the guidance of the previous chapters and get them started. They might end up designing a similar process, or not. Don't try to standardize their process or paste what the first team used. They are different people in a different context, and they deserve a way of working that fits their situation. However, encourage them to frequently look for opportunities to learn from each other. More teams, doing codependent work. Having figured out Agile for one team, you might wish to try it on work that requires 2 or more teams. In project management terms, this would be a program. The teams produce related deliverables, which form part of a bigger whole, and the whole isn't viable without all the parts. For example, a car comprises many separately produced parts, which are all required for the car to be usable and commercially viable, such as engine, doors, mirrors, transmission, and tires. When managing a program in an Agile way, implement the same principles you'd have chosen for the single team. After all, the importance of matters such as outcome orientation, frequent feedback, and cost of change minimization has nothing to do with staff size. However, expect the process to require more effort and time than in the single team case, though not necessarily more so than your pre-Agile methods. Usually, the biggest challenge is the decision making, coordination, and communication needed to keep people working toward the same outcomes. Hence, solutions commonly include program level boards and meetings in addition to team level ones, plus more reliance on managers' support for impediment removal and schedule coordination. The biggest pitfall seems to be a bounce back to the previous value and belief system, for instance, relying on centralized, top-down planning, or each team caring only about doing their isolated part. In the more challenging case, the program teams also have technical dependencies on each other. Not only do their deliverables need to make coherent sense together, what goes into those deliverables involves and affects multiple teams. For example, corporate branding requires consistency of messaging and design across the company's products, physical presence, and communication channels, all of which are likely the responsibility of different teams. This situation is called Agile at scale. Of particular concern is the cost of change, which can grow rapidly if people make local choices that have global effect. In a scaling situation, more people need to expend more energy on decision making, coordination, and communication. On a technical level, they must continuously connect, integrate, the small work done by different teams in order to surface dependencies and prevent nasty surprises early. The closer these people are to the level where real work gets done, the faster and better those decisions are likely to be made. A related helpful pattern is to allow people freedom to move among the program's teams as work needs warrant. This brings us to the matter of moving people around, which becomes a popular option when work spans a long time or many people. In many large organizations that are used to the matrix structure, this option is also the reality, and teams disband after their projects end. The Agile community, by contrast, has been quite vocal about keeping teams stable, so they can build the relationships and collaborative work habits that enable high performance. Rather than shift resources, who are human beings, based on the work, the idea is to have stable teams consistently take in, pull, the most important work. While theoretically sound and in line with the Agile principles, in your context this approach may bump into availability, skill, and motivation challenges. You have a strategic choice to make here. Be careful not to default to traditional resource planning merely because it's familiar and commonplace. In many conditions, the performance of stable, solid, collaborative teams far outweighs the sum of individuals' performance. Note 5, when the overall group is not so large that some people don't know others, there is a middle ground. Nick Helling, Content Marketing Agile Coach, Red Hat, we've created a sub-team within our larger Scrum team. The sub-team works separately from the primary team, focusing on achieving results related to a specific key performance indicator, KPI, that our Chief Marketing Officer identified as a goal for this year. They have their own product owner, a well-defined and frequently prioritized backlog of work, and a workflow based on sprints with WIP limits. Members from the primary team cycle into the sub-team for a period of 2 or 3 sprints. We're finding that the change in focus and workflow has been boosting team morale by providing novelty and a change of pace. Metrics and Measurements Chapter 9 provided a few simple questions to check that the team was indeed working in a new way that was worth keeping. At this point, you, or your management, might be looking for additional metrics and measures. The subject of metrics is immense, and continues to spark raging debates within the Agile community. It is also the subject of uncomfortable arguments between Agile coaches and executives, especially when the latter believe you can't manage what you can't measure. Many Agilists, who don't agree with this belief, will nonetheless agree with you can't manage what you can't see. In more than 20 years of struggling with this matter in the context of software development, the Agile community has come to several realizations, as described below. Note 6. You may not agree with all of them, but do give them serious thought as you choose metrics for your work context. While it's easy to come up with metrics, it's very difficult to come up with metrics that matter. Note 7. To give a personal example, I follow my book sales reports. Low numbers discourage me, and what's worse, I can't know why they're low. If the numbers are high, I feel great that people like my work, although I don't have data for how many buyers actually read and then benefit from the books. Similarly, it is relatively easy to measure local improvements or changes, but harder to correlate them to system-wide effects that are of greater interest to the business. A common pitfall, when good metrics are hard to collect, is to read too much into easier metrics. For example, a popular measure of Scrum team performance is velocity, how many units of effort, called points, they complete in an average iteration/sprint. It is a reasonable measure of capacity, often useful for planning purposes, and easy to calculate. Many people also use it as an indicator of performance, without gathering further evidence that the team's capacity goes toward impactful, finished work. That is merely assumed, because Scrum teams generally work in priority sequence and have a definition of done. It's akin to measuring economical value creation by calculating the gross domestic product, which also captures a lot of necessary but non-value adding work such as snow removal, waste management, and road maintenance. Turning to traditional process metrics for ideas doesn't always help in an agile setting. Usually, that's because they reflect activities or artifacts, but not impact. For example, assessing my progress on this book by counting the hours, words, or sections I write every day won't help me know whether I'm using my time effectively. Only if the numbers are very low will I know something useful, that I'm not making much progress. Since it's human beings who analyze metrics, a host of cognitive biases affect their interpretation. For instance, if I told you, my team gets a velocity of 8 points per sprint, would you consider that good? If I had said instead, they get 24 points per sprint, would you have been more impressed? A team that wants to make a good impression only needs to change the size of a point, as governments used to do with their currencies. Or say the team's velocity is consistent for 4 sprints, and in the 5th it drops by 25%. That drop might invite scrutiny and uncomfortable conversations with management, even though it could also be due to natural variation in the system. Which brings us to the matter of management attention. Metrics don't only assess a system of interest, they influence people's behavior, for better or worse. Of course, management's intent is usually to influence behavior for the better, but their metrics sometimes adversely affect other desirable behaviors. Note 8, they do so by creating artificial competition, salesperson of the month, by triggering limited supply incentives, close more sales, get a bonus, or by compromising psychological safety, you're not closing enough sales. To make matters worse, some metrics might imply there's a problem with a team, when the root cause is the system they work in. John Hill, Agile coach and trainer. Several years ago I had an Agile transformation client that awarded an individual the monthly Game Changer designation, accompanied by a trophy and gift card. Virtually every time this reward was presented, I could see the body language of the other members of that team and feel their resentment for not being appreciated for their contributions as part of the same team. When discussing metrics with management, the focus will likely be work-related, how much, how fast, how well. Since Agile is fiercely people-first, be sure to also pay attention to people's engagement and to factors that affect it. You might measure individual engagement, Note 9, team health, Note 10, motivation, or morale. Recall the fundamental Agile worldview introduced in Chapter 1, healthy teams that consistently delight customers will achieve great business results. If you truly agree with it, ensuring that your teams are healthy and fully customer-minded may considerably reduce the emphasis you place on assessing their work methods. Warning: dangers ahead. No case of organizational change is without its pitfalls and dangers. Even once you're truly agile, what can derail further improvements and the spread of agility, or even cause a reversal? The lure of standards, frameworks, and best practices. If you've followed my guidance in this book, your way of working fits your needs. Its tactics, practices, roles, artifacts, meetings, and so on, are your creation. I hope your team feels that they own their methods, and can adapt them as necessary. And yet, throughout this journey, I bet you've heard some of the following questions, or wondered about them yourself. What's the best way to? What's the right way to? All our other teams do daily stand-up/user stories/sprint demos, etc. Shouldn't we do those as well? Are we following Agile best practices? Are we doing this right? Why am I sure about that? Because at least 1/3 of a typical population prefers to follow proven procedures, note 11, and many procedures have been documented and billed as proven or best practices. Many of those appear in books and blogs, and are taught in courses that carry the extra cachet of certification. For these reasons, you'll hear about many teams using them, which may reinforce their perception as valuable, necessary, or best. Yet that doesn't make them best for you. For every known Agile practice, I can give you examples of teams that didn't find it helpful or workable. Don't take them on because of a halo effect. While there is no Agile standard, there are plenty of good ideas out there, which you might find useful, intriguing, or an inspiration for better tactics or principles for your team. Strip the words best, standard, and right from them, and consider them promising ideas that have worked for some people. The risk, however, is not only from outside. You might be under pressure from above to fit your process into some organizational standard. This is bad news. While it makes large-scale management easier, it compromises safety and agency, and reduces the potential success of individual teams. Instead, help your management establish a coherent culture around explicit values, beliefs, and behaviors within which semi-autonomous teams choose how they work. Cultural pull and drift. The organizational culture needs to be ready, willing, and able to adopt Agile for it to stick and eventually become the norm. That means having a sufficient level of people, orientation, empowerment, psychological safety, tolerance of ambiguity, and openness, among other things. In turn, intentional agility reinforces such a culture. You can't really have one without the other. Cultures, however, are not static. Influential or powerful individuals change cultures intentionally through their words and actions. People also change cultures unintentionally, which I think of as drift. Drift is slow, gradual, and rarely noticed. For instance, organizations don't start out rife with blaming and cynicism, but can get this way through many instances of opaque and siloed decision-making. Rebecca Jensen, CEO, Midwest Real Estate Data, MRED. When I came on board as the CEO 4 years ago, the office culture was overly formal and based on the enforcement of strict rules that limited the development of relationships. All offices were located on this long corridor, and everyone worked behind closed doors. There was little trust between departments, even the copy machine was locked down. It got to be this way over a long period of time. Before we even tried Agile, we modernized the space, created common areas, and moved offices so that teams were near each other and could collaborate more easily. We restructured some jobs, introduced the concept of people backing each other up, and I had to let some people go. A rebranding effort last year also helped reinforce our new culture. We also hire differently now. The team recommends a candidate to hire, and I only meet that person toward the end of the hiring process. You can, and should, have a positive pull on the culture by being intentional and explicit about the substance of your leadership. Monitor changes at the top that may derail your efforts, and pay attention to cultural drift. If you notice any, reversing it should be a priority for you. David Johnson, company name withheld. 18 months into a successful transformation and new product development, the visionary leaders departed for other ventures. The company loved the new product, our customers got super excited, and capital flowed in. Lots of new folks were hired to try to enhance throughput. We were cutting corners, with half the product teams failing to apply basic principles. Schedules got tight and feature scheduling got out of whack. Micromanagement and mistrust started to reach critical mass and fostered such poor working conditions that many key subject matter and technical experts have moved on. Now we have many replacements, even more process, lower throughput, less data, driven decision making, and more whim. Managing people. Much accepted wisdom and common sense around engaging, cultivating, and retaining people actually diminishes agility. One such organizational staple is performance management. In its traditional form, which takes the industrial perspective that people are resources to be utilized, managers use appraisals, threats, and incentives to fix people. In an agile environment, which invites and allows agency and teamwork, this mechanism reduces agency and drives wedges between team members. To the extent you can, replace formal evaluations with frequent coaching based on observations, empathy, and honest feedback. Another organizational standby is accountability, meaning the performance of assigned tasks per expectations and the ability to render an account of shortfalls. That, as in the case of performance management, is not a perspective of agency or willing behavior. Holding people accountable makes the hidden assumption that without it, their actions would fall short of requirements or standards. An agile mind set prefers trust to accountability, believing that treating people as responsible adults and making it possible for them to succeed will yield higher engagement and better results. Throughout your agile journey, you'll see instances of accountability instead of trust. Strive to change that conversation. The third matter has to do with motivating people. 3 kinds of motivators exist. Intrinsic motivators come from within the person. These include autonomy, the ability to make important decisions; mastery, getting good at something important to the person; purpose, doing work that matters to them; enjoyability of the work; and challenge. Note 12, extrinsic motivators come from outside. These include rewards, promotions, bonuses, gift cards, recognition, non-monetary acknowledgement, feedback, thanks, and praise, which is recognition with judgment, as in great job. You're in a player. Hygiene factors are elements whose absence demotivates people. Examples include acceptable working conditions, a salary they can live on, a competent manager, a psychologically safe environment, and knowing how to succeed. Considerable field research and empirical evidence have shown that while rewards and praise, which are ubiquitous in the workplace, can alter behaviors short-term, they have little staying power. And long-term, they may reduce motivation as people start caring more about the rewards than the work. When applied to individuals instead of teams, they also create subtle, or not so subtle, competition. On the other hand, intrinsic motivators, which are individual and can't be standardized, have a stronger staying power and give rise to a healthier culture that aligns with the agile ideals. As a leader, provide the hygiene factors and maintain the conditions that keep your team intrinsically motivated. Recognize team and individual contributions, because people do want to feel important and for their work to be noticed, but dial back on rewards and praise. Rebecca Jensen, we have cross-functional teams work on strategic initiatives, so we don't do individual bonuses anymore. Instead, a percentage of revenue goes into a bonus pool, and each initiative is allocated a percentage of the bonus pool. If it's completed, 50% of the initiative's share is paid equally among all staff and the other 50% is proportional to each staff member's salary. In Chapter 5, I said that an agile transformation is arguably the deepest form of organizational change a person will experience in his or her career. And as you have seen in the chapters since then, doing it properly is a great deal of work. There is much to notice, to do, to not do, to communicate, to explain. Helping people succeed with Agile has been my life's work, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wish you the same experience. Epilogue, a glimpse into the future. Perhaps you picked up this book because your company is pursuing an agile transformation, many do these days. And if the initiative has been your own, your successes, and those of colleagues or competitors, might trigger an executive interest in organizational agility. Today's fast, changing, customer-oriented business landscape makes it less and less optional. Organizational agility has many definitions. One is the ability to build the right things, build them right, and build at the right speed, optimizing for organizational flow. Note 1, another one is being adaptive, creative, and resilient when dealing with complexity, uncertainty, and change. Note 2, however it's defined, and despite differences in tactics, Agile organizations have a great deal in common in terms of the values, principles, and habits I've described in this book. If that's your future, years away, what might it be like? Here is a glimpse. In an Agile organization, more people face the customers, act entrepreneurially, and determine direction. Even with a titular hierarchy, the company is actually organized as a network of teams, roles are decoupled from titles, and people may choose their teams. Everything teams do is oriented toward product, service, solution, outcome, and value, though they might still treat some of their work as projects. While organized along value streams, folks associate with same role colleagues for career development, mutual learning, and consistency. As groups evolve, they become less siloed and align more to other groups in their pursuit of bigger outcomes. In increasingly more cases, where a group would have otherwise treated another one as a customer, the two groups would act as partners, with staff collaborating directly without waiting for approval, permission, or task assignment. Moreover, they reshape their deliverables in support of greater organizational agility. For example, finance generally moves away from predictive, annual, project-based budgeting to value, stream and team-based funding. Managers in an Agile organization, which is flatter than is currently the norm, are enablers of decisions made by people closer to the work. Managers associate themselves with teams, value streams, and capabilities rather than with narrow functions. Teams of managers form and reform to manage the work portfolio, support initiatives, learn together, and improve the system iteratively. They invest considerable time coaching current and coming leaders, which further enables distributed decision making and agility. Chris Taylor, CEO, Fisher's Tech, our master board, visible to everyone in headquarters, reflects our backlog of projects. It is prioritized along two axes, increasing profitability and increasing customer happiness. Our senior team, all VPS, have a weekly stand-up in front of it to review progress and make new choices. Every quarter, we review how our choices turned out and learn from that. One of the responsibilities of leaders is to be intentional about the culture they want. Initially, the motivation and focus are on improving the organization's ways of working for better business outcomes. Later, the organization shifts from being a brand that's agile to being an agile brand. Rebecca Jensen, CEO, Midwest Real Estate Data, MRED, we count over 45,000 real estate professionals among our customers. We've learned that they like working iteratively and being involved. They are feeling the love, they know we're customer-driven and that the feedback they give us doesn't go into a black hole. In 4 years, our Net Promoter Score went from 44 to 65. In 2001, a group of thought leaders penned a manifesto for Agile software development, which they opened with these words: "We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it." In the 18 years since then, humanity continues to uncover better ways to do all kinds of work, and the quest is not over. Where will we go next? Stories from the field. This appendix contains stories from diverse non-software Agile implementations. My goals in choosing these specific accounts have been to demonstrate that Agile is being used successfully in diverse business settings, some of them may even be like yours, to expand your thinking in terms of potential ways to apply the Agile mindset, and to further impress upon you that getting there takes effort, time, and support. Marketing team at a technology company, contributed by Kirsten Bressler, Agile coach, The team consisted of 15 people at the company's headquarters in Germany, and 2 to 3 in each of the company's subsidiaries in San Francisco and Singapore. They designed, built, and maintained the company's internet presence, managed its social media channels, and created promotional material. Every year, they worked on several time-constrained projects, organizing customer-focused events and exhibiting the company's products at trade shows. In addition, the team regularly had to act on short-notice, high-urgency requests from the CEO. The team looked for methods for handling all types of work effectively. In particular, those methods should create good transparency, facilitate communication and collaboration, and support prioritization with their stakeholders. As the Agile coach on staff, I supported them during the first year of their Agile journey. We started with the headquarters team, which had the majority of people and workload. We planned to keep the other locations' staff up to date via already established weekly calls. During a half-day workshop, they defined an initial workflow, decided how to display it on a whiteboard, chose the information to capture on task sticky notes, and determined policies for task management. Within the first 4 weeks, they revised the workflow twice, adding steps as they realized the need for them. After that, they switched to an electronic tool, which enabled sharing and transparency for anyone across all regions. The team played around with various visualizations. For example, they created swim lanes to represent task areas, and tried color coding for priorities and due dates. In their second week, the team started reflecting regularly on the process and adjusting it every time they detected something. For example, they learned that assigning tasks and adding task comments in the electronic tool, despite triggering notifications to the task assignee, was no replacement for personal, verbal communication. They also realized that the daily stand-ups, held first in front of the whiteboard, and later in front of a monitor displaying the electronic task board, were just long and boring status updates. It took them several weeks to upgrade the daily meeting to a team conversation. And while the task board kept reflecting the entire workload, the team continued to manage the specifics of event planning with a traditional project plan, whose visualization of dates and dependencies made scheduling tasks easier. The team took almost half a year to turn their various practices and policies into habits. When I left them, a year after they started, they felt good about their progress. The electronic task board represented all the work, including external dependencies. For instance, it now had a column for "this task is currently in progress" outside the team. They were conducting daily stand-ups in each location, and providing summaries to the other locations on a chat channel. Workload balancing improved, and they noticed and responded to stuck tasks sooner. They held a retrospective in each location every 6 weeks, and an all-hands retrospective twice a year, on-site or with a remote collaboration tool. They were not able to influence the CEO to change his habit of bringing them short-notice work and wanting his tasks done first. However, the task board helped the team negotiate better timelines, especially when working on his tasks conflicted with time-constrained trade show planning, and gave visibility to stakeholders whose deliverables it delayed. Office Design and Build Out, contributed by R.J. Hynek, Agile Continuous Improvement Coach, Red Hat. The company has been expanding rapidly, now at over 16,000 employees worldwide, and an ongoing concern is where to put them all. As the company has a strong focus on a common culture, the 2 prime directives for every new or refurbished office are: 1. Every employee's connectivity experience should be the same across the world, and 2. Every office should reflect the city in which it is located. For a long time, however, the 2 groups that make it happen, office design and technical delivery, were not in sync. There was no sense of partnership around a shared vision due to poor communication and coordination. The leadership from both groups decided to try applying Agile principles in an effort to improve communication on an upcoming high-profile project. They invited me to help. I felt the keys were to ensure that everyone had real visibility into what each group needed at a high level, and to get them to agree on an evolutionary path for the project, its spine. Working with the teams, not only their managers, we conducted a decentralized planning workshop modeled after story mapping. Note 1, focusing on the very sequential activities of building a new office. It wasn't a smooth or pretty process, but they started spotting ill-timed dependencies on things as simple as furniture ordering and intended room use. Equally valuable was the shared mental model they developed for the project. It was a first, and it created a true team. We started with Scrum on the project, but struggled to make it work. Over time, the teams honed their way of working, now called pragmatic delivery, based on 5 practices that they performed with an agile mind: set, decentralized planning, mapping, at the beginning of a project, team standards, owned and developed by the team twice, a week stand-up meetings, increased visibility using rolling, look, ahead planning, frequent retrospectives. We did have some hiccups along the way. For instance, the teams tried to use the agile planning tools that Red Hat software engineers favored, but found them uncomfortable and went back to Excel. We also realized that not all team members had their voices heard in the creation of this way of working. On the other hand, we saw improvement in unexpected places. For example, one of the project managers started using daily stand-ups with his trades vendors. He had greater visibility into their progress, and they had a much clearer idea of when their work would be needed. The most significant development, however, was a policy that leadership established. Any external project management group had to agree to include those 5 baseline practices in their methodology before a contract could be signed. Biotech R&D, contributed by Camilla Frederick Clausen, Koss, Troels Vincenz Hjortholm, and Turkel Tolstrup, Agile coaches with Deloitte Consulting Denmark. Written 3 months into the Agile journey, the company operates in the biotech industry, competing in a global market where innovation and speed in new product development are of the essence. Intrigued by its use of Agile to prove impact quickly and continuously, project and senior managers from the molecular formulation R&D department decided to try Agile on their new development program. They chose a pilot project, consisting of 4 teams of chemists and lab technicians distributed across 3 countries, and focused on developing new molecular formulations to support consumer products. With our facilitation, the project and senior management team initiated the journey by implementing the following: 2-week sprints with co-location time slots, planning events, review meetings, minimum viable product, MVP, planning, retrospective events, and backlog refinement meetings. Initially, a commercial representative as well as senior management acted as business owners to set direction and continuous prioritization, and the project manager acted as product owner. The beginning was rough. Already after the first planning event, the teams were impatient, saying Agile was too chaotic and didn't work for them. These reactions remained during the sprint and through its closing retrospective, even though both actually went well from an Agile standpoint. We, the coaches, felt we hadn't prepared the teams and management enough. We had to make an effort to help the teams understand the process and the effort it takes to establish a completely new way of planning their work. Nevertheless, they agreed to continue with the Agile experiment for at least 2 or 3 months before deciding whether Agile ways of working would actually work well in this setting. A bit into the process, it became clear that senior management expected Agile to be a quick fix for lack of motivation. This did not happen. While sprint planning and retrospective events became much more structured, and everybody grew confident with the process, the initial sprints were characterized by frustration, skepticism, and a feeling of chaos. It was clear that implementing Agile requires human-focused change management along the way, especially in the early days. After a few sprints, we started seeing benefits, the best of which were around overall transparency, the sharing of work, and quicker removal of impediments. The lab technicians in particular placed great value on getting a better overview of the full picture and greater transparency into everybody's work. A key shift occurred in the move from pushing to pulling tasks. Instead of the chemists directing lab technicians to do specific tasks, team members started taking responsibility for choosing their next tasks. The concept of MVP turned out to be a powerful way to foster good discussions, resolve impediments, and create learnings. The team's mindset was shifting. After about 6 sprints, the benefits of Agile became very clear and the company decided to implement it in other molecular formulation teams within the development program. They have started discussing a product roadmap to outline MVPs for the next 3 to 6 months. As well, the teams are looking into conducting system demos for other departments every other month. Doing that can capture early market and commercial feedback while developing new products, a process that traditionally takes 6 to 12 months. Field Service Operations Center at a commercial and residential energy utility, contributed by Anthony Register, Business Agility Coach. The Operations Center is responsible for field service work, taking work orders, dispatching technicians, managing equipment, and so on. For a long time, technicians experienced problems and inefficiencies in the course of their work, and customer feedback indicated dissatisfaction with service. The culture wasn't open to new ideas. This is the way we always do things, and as a result, morale and motivation were low. Leadership decided to have a special team focus on operational process improvement, with the goals of increasing employee engagement, improving customer satisfaction, and reducing costs. After seeing the technology organization's agile transformation and the impact it had on the technologists, their business partners, and their customers, they decided to try approaching process improvement in an agile way. Leadership painted a picture of the vision. As a field technician, when I arrive at work, my truck has everything I need to service my customers safely and then return to base. They prepared the stage for a learning environment, and committed to actively support the experiment for 3 months, in partnership with the Agile implementation team, of which I was a member. We picked from the Operations Center 20 to 25 open-minded, motivated individuals who would remain dedicated full-time to the experiment. These were all people who were, or had been, directly involved with operations, such as procurement and vendor management specialists, schedulers, and front-line supervisors. Now, they were to be Agile team members focused on addressing the processes that they had previously lived with. We educated everyone on the why and what of Agile, choosing Scrum for the how. The team conducted focus groups with paying customers and field service workers, covering a variety of topics such as permits, materials, and scheduling. With everyone in a large open room, and using many sticky notes, we mapped all the input, organizing it into themes and groupings. Folks then selected into 4 Scrum teams of 4 to 6 people each. They wrote down work items related to process improvement, built backlogs, and made team agreements. The 4 teams operated as Scrum teams for the next 3 months. They continuously interacted with the recipients of their process change ideas. Their sprint cycle was 1 week long, each sprint concluding with a review with leadership and a discussion of outcomes achieved and money saved. While they didn't conduct formal retrospectives, continuous improvement of their own work occurred on the fly as a result of conversations always going on. All teams worked in the same large room, which resulted in continuous open communication and flow of information between and across teams. I could see and feel the human energy. Very soon, the teams recognized the dependencies between them, and resolved them with a Scrum of Scrums meeting. They did so without suggestions or training from the coaches. As well, 4 sprints in, the teams decided to reorganize in order to rebalance the skills across the teams. The team noticed a situation. The leadership group frequently brought them unplanned, high-priority requests that compromised their sprint plans. We couldn't influence this behavior, but had enough autonomy and safety to come up with a solution that leadership endorsed. When a request came in, a temporary team would form with individuals from each of the Scrum teams, would work together, swarm, on the request from start to finish, and then the individuals would return to their original team. After the first 3 months, the team's process waste reduction and removal effort yielded substantial bottom-line improvements, even after deducting the cost of the Scrum team's work. Field workers had what they needed at the job site: equipment, material, permits, etc., resulting in improved engagement, motivation, and morale. Customers indicated greater satisfaction with service delivery. The company used our approach as a guideline for other field service center locations. Leadership liked the results and extended the experiment by another 3 months. On a personal level, I feel fortunate to have been a contributor in this situation, where unusually high levels of autonomy, engagement, and participation with purpose resulted in palpable human energy and positive buzz. Acknowledgements: as with my previous works, I couldn't have written this book on my own. Many good souls helped make this book what it is by contributing to my research, by giving me feedback on early and advanced drafts, and by connecting me to others who did the same. These folks are Omar Acuna, Chris Armstrong, Martin Aziz, Mike Bowler, Rob Brown, Liz Casperson, Andy Cleff, Russ Dickerson, Thomas Friend, Ellen Grove, Eve Hanuel, R.J. Hynek, Roger Hutchison, Rebecca Jensen, Travis Klinker, Wolfgang Koman, Bernie Maloney, Gene Moster, Jeremy Pasley, Damon Poole, John Prosser, Jeremy Raleigh, Brianna Ramos, Anthony Register, David Spann, Joel Stone, Chris Taylor, Michael Thomason, Daryl Vaz, Kendra West, and Joanne White. I'm especially grateful to 6 people who went the extra mile with their support: Andy Plattner, Kirsten Bressler, Claire Brown, Suzanne Daigle, Nick Helling, and John Hill. As well, this book wouldn't exist without my non-software clients from the last few years. I'm thankful that they sought my guidance for becoming more agile, and in the process helped expand my perspective on the world of work and the ways Agile can apply to diverse contexts. I'm grateful to my wonderful family for their patience and support during the year-long journey of writing this book. Credit for the cover artwork goes to my daughter, Galia, and as with all my professional work, my wife, Ronit, has been the best reviewer and collaborator. Gil Broza, Toronto, 2019. Notes: Chapter 1:1, The Agile Manifesto. Chapter 2:1, Richard Sheridan, Joy, Inc. How We Built a Workplace People Love, Portfolio, 2015. 2. Richard Sheridan, Chief Joy Officer, How Great Leaders Elevate Human Energy and Eliminate Fear, Portfolio, 2018. 3. This belief is congruent with the Theory Y of worker motivation, which along with Theory X was described in the 1960s. See the Wikipedia entry. 4. The SINEFIN framework offers a typology of contexts that guides what sort of explanations or solutions might apply to a problem, situation, or system. It describes 5 domains, complex being one of them. The other 4 are obvious, complicated, chaotic, and disorder. Chapter 3:1, Beyond Budgeting. Chapter 4:1, The output of this activity has many names, including charter, brief, and one-pager. Chapter 5:1, Amy Edmondson, The Fearless Organization, Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Innovation, and Growth, Wiley, 2018. 2. Shu, Ha, RI is a sequential learning model that originated in martial arts. In Shu, the learner follows the teacher's instructions and focuses on proper execution. In HA, the learner studies the theory and integrates it into his or her practice. In RI, the learner is now a natural and makes his or her own rules. Chapter 7:1, Chip Heath and Dan Heath, The Power of Moments, Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact, Simon and Schuster, 2017. 2. Richard Sheridan, Chief Joy Officer, How Great Leaders Elevate Human Energy and Eliminate Fear, Portfolio, 2018. 3. Outcome thinking is not an Agile invention. It has gained popularity and inspired many techniques in the product and design fields. One example, similar to my description here, is the jobs to be done theory. See Clayton Christensen and Michael Rayner, The Innovator's Solution, Creating and Sustaining Successful Growth, Harvard Business Review Press, 2003. 4. Henrik Nieberg offered this evolutionary progression as a replacement for the minimal viable product, MVP, concept in a 2016 blog post. I have since taught it to many diverse clients, and found that it resonates well and helps build good habits. 5. Here is how this book evolved through earliest testable/usable/lovable. Testable included 3 outcomes, which I worked on sequentially. The first was to figure out the book's topic and understand why I'd want to write it, both for readers and for myself. Then I needed to validate key hypotheses about the readers, such as how they might come to read the book. The third outcome was to determine the book's chapter structure and flow, because changing it mid-writing would be costly. The earliest usable book had just enough to help the target reader get started with solid advice. It included 90% of the eventual text of chapters 1 through 10 and factored in feedback from 5 early readers. It had only some of the stories and no visuals, and did not undergo professional editing. The earliest lovable book incorporated more feedback, examples, and stories. It included all the visuals, though they weren't polished. It had the appendices and the introduction. I added a 4th evolutionary step, which I called the earliest polished book. That version included the foreword, cover art, testimonials, and print-grade visuals, and had undergone professional editing. Contrast this evolution with output-based progress. Write business case. Prepare outline. Conduct field research. Write book. Design interior and cover. Copy editing. 6. Technological development may affect ways of working more when it reduces the cost of change than when it reduces the cost of work. For example, think how easy it is for you to write large documents and emails, not because of replacing a pen with a keyboard, but because of easy cutting, copying, and pasting. 7. Dr. Glenn Wilson, a University of London psychologist, led a study of infomania at King's Psychiatry College. Employees jumping between several projects and experiencing constant distractions saw a 10-point fall in their IQ, the same effect as losing a night's sleep. For comparison, a group that smoked marijuana experienced half this IQ point drop. Chapter 8.1, this is known as Gall's Law. Originally published in John Gall, System Antics, the underground text of systems lore, General System Antics Press, 1986. 2. For general meeting facilitation, see Michael Wilkinson, The Secrets of Facilitation, The Smart Guide to Getting Results with Groups, Jossi, Base, 2012. For Agile meeting facilitation, see Jean Tabaka, Collaboration Explained, Facilitation Skills for Software Project Leaders, Addison, Wesley Professional, 2006. Chapter 9.1, in this context, several Agile coaches like to use the now paraphrased quote from the 19th century Prussian Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, no plan survives contact with the enemy. 2. The latest edition of A Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge by the Project Management Institute has 756 pages. 3. A popular technique is to note, on each small work item, when the team put it in the ready column and when they finished working on it. Calculate the time difference between those points, and you have data for detecting trends, variants, and effects of attempted changes. For more, see Chapter 11 in Marcus Hamarberg and Joachim Sundin, Kanban in Action, Manning, 2014. 4. These ideas all come from the Kanban method. You can read about them in any current Kanban book. While they apply across all knowledge work, I haven't been able to locate a reference that explains the ideas using non-software development concepts and lingo. 5. Are you wondering why I'm addressing this matter now? instead of when you designed the initial workflow? Because I wanted you to first have a solid mechanism for regular operations, which is hard enough to get right, rather than expect and legitimize interruptions from day one. 6. As explained in Chapter 7, sprints, time boxes, are another artificial way to constrain work intake that ought to stabilize the system and enable a sustainable pace. The popular term velocity indicates how much work the team does in an average sprint, and calculating it can help them plan to capacity. With its implications of speed, however, I've seen this term create bad dynamics and wrong interpretations of team agility. If you use sprints, I suggest replacing velocity with the more neutral term capacity. 7. Esther Derby and Diana Larson, Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great, The Pragmatic Bookshelf, 2006, Patrick Qua, The Retrospective Handbook, A Guide for Agile Teams, LeanPub, 2012. 8. R. Brian Stanfield, The Art of Focused Conversation, 100 Ways to Access Group Wisdom in the Workplace, New Society Publishers, 2009. 9. The following questions trace the ORID sequence to elicit thoughtful feedback on emerging deliverables. You may want to adapt them to your situation, and probably use only some of them. O. What did you observe? What did it do? R. What did you like about it? What surprised you? What differed from your expectations? What would you have liked to see? I. How would you use it? What other uses could it have? As we continue working on this, what should we watch out for? How does this simplify your work? What questions is this bringing up for you? D. What should we change? What should we enhance? Which change is the highest priority? What should we not work on anymore? 10. John P. Cotter, Leading Change, Harvard Business Review Press, 2012, Esther Derby, 7 Rules for Positive, Productive Change, Micro Shifts, Macro Results, Barrett, Kohler Publishers, 2019. Chapter 10:1, Fred Brooks made this observation in his 1986 paper, No Silver Bullet. It is now reprinted in Fred Brooks, The Mythical Man, Month, Essays on Software Engineering, Anniversary Edition, Addison, Wesley Professional, 2018. 2. There are many good books on lean thinking that focus on either manufacturing or development. For books on eliminating waste in business, see James P. Womack and Daniel T. Jones, Lean Thinking, Banish Waste and Create Wealth in Your Corporation, Free Press, 2003, and Linda M. Or, Eliminating Waste in Business, Run Lean, Boost Profitability, Press, 2014. 3. Tom DeMarco, Slack, Getting Past Burnout, Busy Work and the Myth of Total Efficiency, Broadway, 2002. 4. Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player, How to Recognize and Cultivate the 3 Essential Virtues, Jossi, Base, 2016. The 3 virtues are humble, hungry, and smart. 5. Gil Brozat, The Human Side of Agile, How to Help Your Team Deliver, 3P Vantage Media, 2012, Heidi Helfand, Dynamic Reteaming, How We Thrive by Rebuilding Teams, Reteam, 2019. 6. For deep research, experience, and insights into metrics and measurements, read the blog of Troy McGinnis. 7. David J. Anderson and Alexei Jeglov, Fit for Purpose, How Modern Businesses Find, Satisfy and Keep Customers, Blue Hole Press, 2018. 8. In an example that made the news a few years ago, the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA, set itself a measurable goal: callers to its customer service center would be answered within 2 minutes. Here is a snippet from the independent auditor's report of what happened as a result. The agency had a traffic team in each of its 9 call centers. The teams were tasked with ensuring that wait times to speak with an agent did not exceed 2 minutes. One of the ways the traffic team accomplished this was by blocking calls or directing them to the automated self-service system when the wait time approached 2 minutes. Blocked calls were any calls that did not reach either an agent or the automated self-service system. Callers who did not succeed in reaching an agent needed to redial the agency if they still wished to speak with one. 9. A tool that several of my clients have found helpful is Gallup's Q12 survey. 10. See the Health Checks for Teams and Leadership blog post from Jimmy Janlin at CRISP. See also Sandy Mamalai and David Mole, Creating Great Teams, How Self-Selection Lets People Excel, The Pragmatic Bookshelf, 2015. 11. Shel Rose Charvet, Words That Change Minds, The 14 Patterns for Mastering the Language of Influence, Institute for Influence, 2019. 12. Daniel Pink, in Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, Riverhead Trade, 2011, discusses autonomy, mastery, and purpose. In my unresearched opinion, enjoyability and challenge are also necessary conditions for motivation. Epilogue 1, Jürgen Hesselberg, Unlocking Agility, An Insider's Guide to Agile Enterprise Transformation, Addison, Wesley Professional, 2018. 2. Agile Business Consortium, https://www.agilebusiness.org/page/Waddy's Business Agility, accessed August 18, 2019. Appendix, Stories from the Field 1, Jeff Patton, User Story Mapping, Discover the Whole Story, Build the Right Product, O'Reilly Media, 2014. Meet Gil Broza, Principal Agile Mentor and Owner, 3P Vantage, Inc. Email contact, broza@3pvantage.com. Over the last 15 years, Gil has supported almost 100 large and small, private and public, sector organizations along their Agile journeys. Seeking transformations, makeovers, or improvements, these clients have relied on his pragmatic, modern, and respectful guidance for customizing Agile in their contexts. Previously, Gil worked as a development manager, team leader, and programmer for many years, successfully applying Agile methods since 2001. He has served as a regular writer for the prestigious magazine ProjectManagement.com, a PMI publication, and as a track chair for the Agile 2009, 2010, and 2016 conferences. He regularly gives keynotes and interactive talks at various conferences worldwide. Throughout his career, Gil has focused on human characteristics that prevent positive outcomes in teams. These include limiting habits, fear of change, outdated beliefs, and blind spots, among many others. In helping teams overcome these factors, he supports them in reaching ever higher levels of performance, confidence, and accomplishment. In 2012, he published The Human Side of Agile, the definitive guide to leading Agile teams. In 2015, he published The Agile Mind Set, helping practitioners and leaders alike master the Agile approach and make their ways of working truly effective. With this book, Gil helps extend Agile transformations to non-technical teams. Gil provides training, coaching, consulting, facilitation services, and enablement programs to establish Agile ways of working, fix lackluster Agile attempts, and support ongoing Agile improvement efforts. In addition, he offers much needed services to help managers, Scrum Masters, and team leaders grow as servant leaders. He is in high demand by organizations looking to fully realize Agile's potential. See his current offerings at 3pvantage.com/services. Notes Chapter 2, Consider how Agile differs from your current way of working. 1. Sometimes, managers put dates on work as a way to spur people into action and later hold them accountable. While some workers find this mechanism helps them, I think it's the wrong solution to a misdiagnosed problem. Another solution, which helps organizations become healthier and more resilient, is to articulate the work's outcome and allow workers freedom to move within meaningful, justifiable, prioritized parameters, which might include dates. Right arrow curving left. 2 Servant leaders create conditions that enable others to grow and do their best work. Instead of relying on power or positional authority, they serve. Agile leadership subscribes to this philosophy and enriches it with concepts relevant to Agile environments. Read more on this in Chapter 9. Right arrow curving left. Chapter 4, determine where you'll try Agile for the first time. One available literature and training on Agile might give you the impression that it's only for development. That's because it focuses almost exclusively on software teams, which typically work on single large products and mostly engage in development. What production they do is mostly automated, there's little BAU, and other departments usually handle support. This arrangement is due to the traditional function, orientation of organizational structures, to the high number of people required for the development of software, and to the disruptive effect of unpredictable support work on the focus needed for development. Right arrow curving left. 2 You'll find many examples in Chapter 2. Additional ones I use sometimes are data quality, innovation, keeping the auditor/regulator happy, and avoiding disaster. Right arrow curving left. Chapter 6, prepare for the journey. 1 Chapter 9 gives a few specific tips on leading vs. managing. For more, consult my book The Human Side of Agile. Right arrow curving left. 2 To see what I offer in this regard, head over to 3pvantage.com/services. Right arrow curving left. Chapter 7, learn enough about Agile principles to get started. 1 The extreme and wasteful form of iteration is rework, throwing the result out and starting over. Rework rarely occurs when a team follows the other principles mentioned in this chapter. Right arrow curving left. 2 Older literature on Agile recommended iteration/sprint length of up to 30 days. These days, blocking off and planning for this much undisturbed time, without intermediate feedback and adaptation points, doesn't seem practical for most kinds of work. Hence, most teams use cycles of 1 or 2 weeks. Right arrow curving left. 3 User stories are a popular, but not the only, way to capture what I refer to here as meaningful work items. A story generally contains at least 3 key pieces of information: what the deliverable/solution is, who will use it, and why it's valuable, what outcome it serves. Right arrow curving left. Chapter 8, design your initial way of working. 1 For example, if the work involves a lot of communication with third parties, you might add a state called waiting for response, or, if checking the deliverable requires 2 or more levels of inspection, you could separate those into distinct workflow steps. Right arrow curving left. 2 Notice I didn't say the right track, there may be more than one way to accomplish an outcome. Right arrow curving left. 3 A typical meeting should be 5 to 15 minutes long. To be efficient, it should focus on matters that concern the entire team. After it's over, small groups proceed to discuss matters that interest only them. Right arrow curving left. 4 Consensus does not mean 100% agreement or having the same opinion. When a group reaches consensus on a suggestion, it means all the members agree to support it so that the group can move ahead, even if some individuals may have different preferences. Right arrow curving left. 5 Agile favors flat structures, but 99.99% of real-world Agile teams operate inside an organizational hierarchy or an uneven power structure. That does not invalidate Agile's applicability, but it may make it harder. Right arrow curving left. Chapter 9, support the team during the first few months. 1 A popular way to run retrospectives is to have everyone write down what worked well and what could be improved, or what to start/stop/change. This way is shorter, because it skips the O and the R steps of ORID. It's also less valuable for the same reason, as it effectively invites the team to offer solutions before they discuss problems.